I think we're good. Just to introduce you to Eric Thomas is the coordinator. Is a coordinator at Parks Canada Quebec Field Unit in Quebec City. He completed his master's degree in history at Laval University and worked at the Citadel of Quebec at the Plains of Abraham and as a carriage tour driver, which some of the folks in this group have done that in Charleston, in Old Quebec. So he was a guide there. After 15 years of working full-time in the colonial era and also studying the history of the Cold War, so two bookend parts of history, he joined Parks Canada in 2016, where he's continued to expand his knowledge of early Quebec history. So we're very excited to hear from Eric tonight. And so with that, Eric, I'll let you just go ahead and share your screen and we will get going. And at the end, we'll entertain some questions.
Great. Well, bonsoir à tous. Good evening, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you for the presentation of the Fortifications of Quebec. So I will share my screen right away to start our presentation. So here we start. All right, so of course I won't see you during the presentation. Like Catherine said, if you have any questions, don't be shy to write them in the chat box. We'll take the time to answer all of them at, of course, the end of my conference. So from Champlain's fort to UNESCO World Heritage Site, the history of Quebec City's fortifications. Well, to begin with, I need to say a word about Parks Canada, our mandate and charter. We are the one protecting the historic national sites of Canada, parks, also national parks. So the Fortifications of Quebec is part of the mandate and charter. And on behalf of the people of Canada, we present nationally significant examples of Canada's natural and cultural heritage and foster public understanding, appreciation, and enjoyment in ways that ensure the ecological and commemorative integrity of these places from present and future generations. So I want to share a small video, a bit of promotion, but and it will show you also the infrastructure program we had since 2015 for Parks Canada. You see here the numbers, and especially for Quebec City, 75 million in the last 7 years. That is 40% of the wall of the fortifications that were restored, including parts of Lévis and also Colonial. So our site was quite, let's say, pampered in the last years, and we have this small video I wanted to show. So here it starts. All right, so let's get back to the presentation now. So I will share again my diorama. There we go. So everybody, so let's continue. So this being said, very important details to understand the natural defense, Quebec City natural defense. Quebec, as you can see, it's a bit far from the Atlantic wall as we saw up to now with our two cities that were in St. Augustine, Florida, and also Charleston, South Carolina will be around here, this lovely place in the Bermudas next week. So the St. Lawrence is the first natural defense, the river. As you can see, it gets inside the continent, and it really narrows arriving to Quebec City. Quebec means in Algonquin language, where it narrows, where the river narrows. This big chunk of land that is next to the E and C at the end of Quebec is called the island of Orleans. Let's take a view from the tip of the island and from the city itself. So we are located right there, or if you prefer, right here. And this is what we can see around, well, on this Google image on the top, and on this picture I've taken from the glacis of the Citadel. The round point is the tip of the island of Orleans. Here we have a shipyard, and it really creates a 90-degree angle. The boats will arrive from the south channel, which is right here, or the north. You can see here the outline of a bridge, which is here. And I wanted to show this part of the harbor because it is actually the entrance of a river, very important around Quebec City, which is called the St. Charles River. So the natural defense, the St. Lawrence River, and because it narrows, we actually have tides in Quebec that varies up to 12 to 15 feet high tides twice a day. So yes, the current switch direction with the tides as well. So this being said about the river, we have to keep in mind also that Quebec is built on a cliff. The second natural defense is this cliff. Not only a small part that we call Cape Diamond, it is over 20 kilometers long, which is roughly something like 10 miles. I'm not really sure. So maybe you saw the image of Quebec built on a cliff with the Chateau Frontenac. We have a clear view here of what it looks like. Now, to understand Canadian history, 4 historical periods, pre-European context. For thousands of years, First Nations were living here on the continent, and it developed a system of diplomacy, of alliances, of trading that, of course, Europeans will need to take in context when they arrive here. And for Canada, the first period is the French colonial period that starts with Champlain. Well, some people will say Jacques Cartier in 1534, but for the purpose of our presentation, let's say 1608 with Samuel de Champlain. British time period starts in 1763. Americans know the French and Indian War, the rest of the world, the 70 Years' War, Canada, the Conquest War, which is basically the same. It ended with the Treaty of Paris. I will talk about it later on. And finally, this period ends with the Canadian period, 1st of July, Canada Day, 1867, that we still celebrate every 1st of July today. To build fortifications, Quebec, anywhere else in the world, factors needs to be, you need to keep in mind some important factors. Strategic, which is basically the evaluation of the area that you need to protect, the knowledge of your enemy's forces, and also the climate, where you are living. Technical, your own forces, and also the topography, so the landscape. Cyclical, let's say time war versus peacetime versus wartime. So if you can build things if you're in war or not, and also the budget that you have. And I've put evolution in quotation mark. I don't know how really to translate this in English, but it's basically the evolution of your engineers, so their knowledge, the school, and also the evolution of the art of defense and the art of war. Cannons, basically, mostly cannons. Now, you see the names of the wars that are linked with our national historic sites. I won't talk about them because I only have less than an hour to talk about the fortifications of Quebec, but you can see that most of the wars, well, there's an influence with Quebec City. All right, so now let's go on with our first fortification, Samuel de Champlain, Habitation in 1608. It's basically a medieval fort built of wood, 3 floors high that could hold cannons, and it was built right by the river, as we can see here, insert a circle on the map. This first habitation was replaced by a second in 1623. It will be built in masonry 10 years later. And in Quebec City, we have markings on the ground that shows the habitation turrets where it was. So if ever in Quebec City, in this part of town, be sure to look on the ground. The ground is actually speaking to us in Quebec City. After Champlain, well, Champlain, before his second habitation, will take advantage of the cliff with the first Fort Saint-Louis. 1620, 6 years later, the second one, it is the structure we see here, built on the top to protect his habitation that was built by the river. It is another historic national site of Canada. There was 4 forts built total between 1620 and 1692. Here's the third one, the fourth one, and of course, it's an archaeological site of high importance by the Chateau Frontenac, and we did some excavation, and it's a site you can visit, by the way. There was also a castle built inside the limits of the fort. After Champlain passed away in the middle of the 17th century, New France, most of the threat they're facing comes from the First Nations, the 5 nations of the Iroquois. It's known as the Beaver Wars for American historians, or we can also call it the Franco-Iroquois Wars. So to protect against this new type of attack, we're not talking about Europeans that declare wars, it's guerrilla tactics of warfare. So in Quebec City, religious orders, as we can see on the image on the right side, built walls around their own domains. In case of an attack, they could shelter in this small forts that were built a bit everywhere on the land. And also, the first governor in 1636 decided to build the first street in a radial plan that converged towards the Fort Saint-Louis, the fort that was built first by Champlain. And today, we can still see the streets that converge towards the old fort. The city still has, like we saw for Charleston, remains of this 1636 plan. The map, by the way, was drawn in 1660. So at the end of the century, there's the first, let's say, European attack. Admiral Phipps from Boston sailed up to Quebec City, and in a hurry, the Major Provost built a wooden palisade that looked like this. Standard palisade with a small amount of groundwork behind it to support, let's say, artillery pieces. But let's be honest, it's a weak palisade. It's only built of wood. And not only this, well, to reinforce it, there were some stone redoubts, 11 of those redoubts. But take a look where it was. It is this small line right here. The citadel, this big structure here, was not occupied. So 3 years after the wooden palisade, the engineer Josué Bois Berthelot de Beaucourt, it's even hard for me to pronounce that name. So he built the second wall, which is a rampart in 1693. We see the plan here that he drawn, and it looks something like this. It's built of wood, again, but now there's a rampart, a huge amount of groundwork behind to sustain firepower of cannons. There's also a ditch and also some branches in the front to stop the enemy progression towards the wall. But there's a weak point that needs to be addressed. This height. So Josué Bois Berthelot de Beaucourt in 1693 added 2 masonry structure to his plan. The Cavalier du Moulin, so there was a windmill that is now fortified with a wall. And also on the top, redoubt, a stone structure to fire over the wall that he built. And today in Quebec City, well, guess what? You can see them still today. They are still built, strong, and it dates from 1693. Let's continue. In the beginning of the 1700s, France decided that Quebec needs to be fortified. It is a stronghold. It is the capital of New France. So there is a need to build a fortification wall around it. Jacques Levasseur de Néré is the new engineer, and he arrives at the beginning of the century, and he came up with a plan that not only fortified the heights of the city, the west part needs to be protected, but remember, Quebec is built on a cliff, so there's already 2 sides that are naturally protected. But the river side, the city that is by the river, is not protected. So Jacques Levasseur de Néré decided to build a wall here on the west side, and also a fortification at the bottom that would extend the city's limit on the river. The thing is, didn't have the budget to complete this work, even if it was approved by Vauban himself. So there's only that part that was built, and he also added entrenchment. There was let's say an issue with him and l'intendant, the one that he was the one in charge of the finance in the colony. So he's called back to France in 1709, and Beaucourt came back, and he came with another plan. Instead of going again with the heights here on the west side, he came back with his former line to build a knoll for the same fortification line that he built in 1693. But he said that I will add some structure, some redoubts. You will see them, those small round things that you see on a circle. And he started to build those structure, and in 1713, peace was signed. So those buildings were actually not finished at the end of the war, and his plan was just abandoned. He didn't have the time to build his plan that we can see right here. But those were built. 1712, 1713. They were completed years later, and in Quebec City, still today, you can see and admire this beautiful building that is called the Redoubt Dauphine that dates from 1712. I will talk about it later on. Let's talk about another engineer. Hopefully I'm not losing you for now. It's a very important part of Quebec's history, the beginning of 1700 until 1720. So the third engineer that appears in New France, Gaspard Joseph Chose-Gros-de-Léry. If there's only one name you must remember, it is that name. He starts with adding some fortification on the top. It is the small line that you see there. But in 1720, in France, the fortification plans are not concentrated in Quebec anymore. There's other places that need to be protected in New France. So it will take another 20 years before we can see some things added to the city, because there's a war actually. So Chose-Gros-de-Léry added batteries of cannons that you can still see today on the edge of the cliff, as we can see right here. I took this picture 2 weeks ago. You can see there's no leaves in the trees. And the war ended 3 years later. 3 years later, there was an important event. There was a fortress that was taken, and in Quebec City, it was panic. In 45 and until 59, Quebec City will build the West Rampart. It is the wall that you can still see today. It was built by Gaspard, well, not built by him, but the plan are by Gaspard Joseph Chose-Gros-de-Léry. And like I've said, it is this wall that you can see today. Also, Chose-Gros-de-Léry added a very important area in Quebec, which is the Barrackman area. This very long building called the New Barracks are built in 1748. And the Redoubt Dauphine that I talked earlier, that was built in 1712, is now completed, and all this sector is transformed into a Barrackman sector. Close to 400 soldiers were stationed in those two buildings. Also, Chose-Gros-de-Léry, I had a small thought about the powder magazine in Charleston. I wanted to show you a powder magazine that he added that we can still see today. So I just wanted to have a little, just a little, hello, Charleston. So you can visit this in the Citadel. It's a museum today. All right. We talked about this flankman défilement, flankman concealment. Those are two important conception of the fortification that was really perfected by Vauban. The idea of flankman, the flank, the side, has cannons aiming directly at soldiers that would try to hide on this part of the wall. The défilement, the concealment, is the cannons that are aiming towards the glacis, because the glacis hides the fortification walls. Let's take views of pictures to try to understand better those conceptions. So flankman, you see cannons placed on the side. There was a gate here before. So if enemy arrives here, cannons will fire at them. There was cannons here firing at the other side. See here flanks, cannons firing on the side. Here, you are standing here. Okay, let's say you're here. This building, you're here. Understand? Okay, let's take another view from another picture. You are here, next to the cross. The cross is here, so you're right by that wall. Take a look what we have right there. Cannons. But not only this, there's also another row of cannons on the top. So if ever you arrive in this sector, there's the wall, the ditch, advanced work, you are stuck in the crossfire, the flank of the fortification walls. The concealment, see this small tree and the light pole? We see the light and the tree here. They're aligned, but not here. And see, we can barely see two humans walking here, but we see them chest high. It's actually a street. The concealment, you clearly see the hill, what it does. It hides the fortification walls that are right here. 1759, just before the famous Battle of the Plains of Abraham, the wall is complete. Now we know this. Maybe you've heard about James Wolfe, Montcalm, the Battle on the Plains of Abraham, the British troop that scale up a cliff like we can see on this painting. Well, it was totally a surprise for the French troops because, of course, nobody expected an army to scale up a cliff to face another army on the Plains of Abraham. So this was quite a surprise, and the battle was a British victory, and after this, New France will eventually cease to exist with the Treaty of Paris in 1763. The map on the left shows the possessions in European possessions before the war. The one on the right shows in 1720 New France. I thought it was important to show this because you see this dark area is the 13 colonies, Louisiane, French colony, Great Lakes area, French colony, the St. Lawrence River, Canada, also French colony. So you see it's quite expanded. I also like to show this map. I know it's not really accurate, but it shows from 1534 to 1803, at one point, the area that was controlled by French powers. So yes, it was an enormous territory that in 1763 became British. What's left of French territory are here and Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon in North America. Of course, there are some French islands that were kept in the Caribbean. So what I want to say about this is basically for the British, well, French are gone. There's no threat anymore in North America. So of course the walls are not totally perfect. There's still some advanced work that needs to be completed, but there's no threat anymore. Of course, that was before the turmoil in the 13 colonies. In 1775, 1776, American troops actually attacked Quebec City, besieged the city. Well, during winter, it was not a good idea. Maybe you heard about Richard Montgomery that attacked. He died here in Quebec City. He was buried here. And it was also America's favorite hero. What's his name again? Benedict Arnold. Maybe you heard about him. Well, both of them were here in Quebec City. And I know that Benedict Arnold gave up a fort at the end of the Independence War. I was just a bit teasing my American fellow friends. So in 1775, 1776, the troops attacked. It was the only attempt during the Independence War, but the British are afraid that they will try again to attack. So they start by adding a temporary citadel just outside the city walls, and we still see some vestige of this temporary citadel. The street goes around it. At the end of the war, Gutherman, the new engineer in what is now the province of Quebec, British colony, came up with a plan of defense from that you can see the year 1785 to 1815. 4 things that need to be considered for Gutherman plan of defense. Complete advanced work in front of the French rampart. The wall on the north and east side must be completed as well. French didn't build a wall on this side. It's a cliff. They only added some batteries of cannons, this and there. So for the British, they want to complete that wall. Also, occupy the Plains of Abraham. It's a big open field. Enemy could easily place himself on the plains, and is actually higher points on the plains than the citadel. So they could occupy a higher point and bombard the city from away from on the plains. And finally, the citadel. A permanent citadel needs to be built. His plans starts by gates that are added. Hope Gate. If ever you want to know what is this that I'm just showing those images, Hope Gate, Prescott Gate. This is the scale model of Quebec City that was made in 1808 that is over 200 years old. It's a very unique artifact. If ever you're in Quebec City, be sure to check us out at the Fortifications of Quebec. You could see this unique artifact that is 18 feet total in length and something like 12 feet wide. It's the old Quebec. It's a very amazing thing that you must see if you're in Quebec, of course. So let's go back to Guthrie. 2 gates were added. That means that the advanced work must be completed as well in 1807, 1811, like we can see here on the scale model of Quebec. It would be there today. He also, the north and east wall were completed, and on the plains of Abraham, 4 towers were added that we call Martello Towers. Today we have 3 Martello Towers that are left. The number 3 was destroyed to make space for a hospital. And finally, the citadel, built between 1820 and 1831. It is a big fortress that is still today an active military base. So at the end of at the beginning of the 1830s, Quebec City is a complete fortified city. The Americans won't attack. So the British, Quebec is an important harbor, so it's really well protected. But there's another threat, the Civil War. So there's a new engineer, William Drummond Gervois, that is sent to the colony in 1864 with a defense plan. His defense plan is not only to protect Quebec, that we see here, the capital of the Lower Canada. St. Lawrence River goes to the Great Lakes. We have here Ontario Lake, and here we have a Superior Lake, Erie Lake, and Michigan, well, the Great Lakes. So the St. Lawrence Seaway goes towards the interior of the continent. And also in the same years, there was a railroad that was built that goes directly to Portland, Maine, and that goes to Detroit. So the British are afraid that Americans could use those roads to try to invade Canada. Gervois decided to fortify Kingston. South of Montreal, there's an island here, island of Sainte-Hélène, and in front of Quebec at Lévis. I repeat, the city is well protected. But on the south shore, Gervois came with a plan of building forts, advanced forts, like we could see in Europe, that are aiming towards the field, towards the south, so towards the United States. Each of the forts could protect each other. If one was taken, the other one could destroy it. And if the number 1 fort was destroyed, it is the one we see here that you can visit. It's another historic national site of Canada. Well, if this fort was taken, from the citadel, the guns that were here could destroy the fort. How? Because a thin wall is facing our cannons. The field, right here, aiming towards, of course, well, the British were aiming their guns towards the field where the American troops could arrive on foot. And in 1871, well, it's actually Confederation 4 years before. There was a treaty between Canada and the United States, Treaty of Washington. So there's no need to keep troops anymore in Canada. The British garrison leaves. What is next for the fortification, you may ask? Well, population is really happy. Not only the population, but also the authorities. They voted to destroy, to get rid of the fortification walls. We don't need them anymore, after all. There's no troops, and the walls are actually blocking the evolution of the city. So the gates are destroyed by the population. And there's one person that came up, Lord Dufferin, Governor General. He came up and he publicly said that we must preserve the walls of the city. We must keep them and embellish the city by creating a promenade. Yes, the gates are destroyed, that's fine. We'll rebuild it in a more romantic fashion. Big gates that says to the people, please come in. Not like the former gates that were just saying to the people, keep out. Also, the vents work. Let's get rid of those. Let's take back the stones to build those gates that we see today. So the vents work, the stones were reused for the gates we have now. The Kent gate we see here at the bottom is actually not even an original gate. It was a small hole in the wall. It was a postern, a passage for the soldiers to go in and out of the fortification. But the west part, there was only 2 exits. There's a third one that was built with the Kent gate. The other gates that he wanted to rebuild, there was an economic crisis, so he was on, the plan was not let's say complete with the gates that he wanted to rebuild. But the rest, the preservation of the walls, well, this is what we do at Parks Canada, basically. It's the plans that Lord Dufferin came up in 1871 that we preserve and that you can see today. Because of Lord Dufferin, the district of the Old Quebec was designed a World Heritage Site by the UNESCO. Because of the fact that we preserved an urban ensemble, is an exceptional example of a fortified colonial town in the most complete north of Mexico. And of course, it's the cradle of French North America. But if it wasn't from Lord Dufferin, who knows what have happened to the fortification walls of Quebec? You can think of the fortification walls of Montreal. Have you ever saw those walls? They're gone. New York City, Wall Street, walls are gone. So yes, Quebec is really unique in North America because we've kept the fortification, and Lord Dufferin really needs to take the credit for this. His promenade looks something like this, a wall from the 1700s, beginning of the 1700s, from the 1720s, mid-18th century, end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century, the fortification wall is still here. Citadel, the Martello Towers that we see on the left side, and the Citadel of Quebec, still complete and still an active military base as we talk today. You can walk on all those fortification walls. This is 4.6 kilometers, more than 2 miles total. It's quite impressive. And well, I know that you love winters. So oh, my cat, bonjour. Sorry about him. So yes, like promised, I wanted to show you a bit of winter pictures. So yes, this is actually real pictures of Quebec City. This is snow up to the fortification walls. You saw this earlier when I talked about the concealment, those holes we saw in the, so yes, a lot of snow, more snow. This is my street after a snowstorm. It's a car, I know. This is the beautiful promenade by the cliff. If ever it's windy in wintertime, be sure to walk on this promenade because you're actually covered from the wind and you have beautiful viewpoints on the St. Lawrence River. Yes, it's snow over the walls. And that's my small hill when I go up to work. So this is what it looked like after freeze rain. It's quite nice. So this is the end of my presentation. I took a little less than 40 minutes. I just want to say a last thing. I'm going to stop the sharing of my presentation here. I'm going to come back to you guys. So, you know, the district of the Old Quebec, it's close to half of the buildings that were built before 1850. The Circle District of the Old Quebec covers 135 hectares, which is 5% of the actual city today, that is close to 700,000 inhabitants. And it is the remains that we have, you saw those, it is among the most current Korean area, such colonial area that we find in North America. We used to call it La Vieille Capitale, the old capital. We try to change a bit the name because, you know, it's like we're stuck in the old times and we're looking towards modern days in front of us, right? But one thing's for sure is that because of this vieille capitale, this old aspect, while modern day tourists wants to see those vestiges. And I hope that this presentation gives you a little quick history of the fortification, that you can now understand a little bit more that it's not only a big wall that was built in one part of time, it's really through different years. And that at Quebec City, Parks Canada, we do a very important job of keeping the fortifications so that you guys can still see them in future years. So I want to thank you for your interest. I hope I didn't talk too fast, because I know that's always my bit of my problems. So if there's any questions, I'm all ears. All ears.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. We were talking about winter. I've told you that I've been to Quebec twice, both times in January, and near the cliff, there's a giant toboggan slide, and I did that. Yes. And I didn't die. And my husband's beard almost froze off.
Yeah, the toboggan slide dates from 1884.
It's so fun.
It is it's wooden. It's on the boardwalk on the next to the Chateau Frontenac, the Terrasse Dauphren. So now you know that the name Dauphren is really important in Quebec City. So the name of the terrace is from him. The first terrace was built over the ruins of the castle that burned in 1834. And there was a second one that was extended. And the one we have today is because of the plans of Lord Dufferin, because he wanted to make a promenade on all the fortifications. And so when you walk on the boardwalk, you're on the top of the hill.
And there's some places where you can look down inside of that, which is really interesting.
That's if you in the beginning of the presentation, I show some pictures of archaeological pictures. So what you can see through the windows is the remnants of the Chateau Saint-Louis. Fort and Chateau Saint-Louis, Historic National District, National Historic Site of Canada, official residence of 30 of the 40 colonial governors of Canada, French and British. It was, I could say, one of the most important building in colonial American history, North American history.
You guys have so much, there's so much still in the landscape, and I was going to ask you about the preservation of that. And you answered it about Lord Dufferin. Even after Lord Dufferin was there in the 1870s, did everybody just say, okay, we're going to preserve these walls? Were there ever any moves in the 20th century to say, hey, we should get rid of these? Or was it just sort of universally appreciated? In
the beginning, the intervention of Lord Dufferin really came from the fact that people wanted to get rid of those fortification walls. After the departure of the British troops, the fortifications were given the management of them were given to the new War Department of Canada, and they really wanted to get rid of those walls. It was voted. They were getting rid of it, and the population was happy about this. But Lord Dufferin listened to the people that said, we must keep them, we must destroy them. He made some public speeches for Governor General. He represents, after all, the king, right, in England. So it's a very important figure in political, and still today in Canada, it's the head of state, right? Justin Trudeau is the head of the government. The head of state is the Governor General that represents the Queen. So Canada is a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy still today. So it's he came up, he did some speeches, he even called the people that were destroying the walls vandals and guts, and he was inspired by Viollet-le-Duc in works in France. You probably heard his name when the cathedral burned in Paris. The big spear that was made by Viollet-le-Duc, Carcassonne, this big fortified medieval town in France. The preservation of those things, it was really in the time of at the end of the 19th century, military person that saw this heritage getting destroyed, they're romantic about that period, right?
Right.
So they're talking about this period as we must keep this because it's beautiful. We must embellish the city by keeping the walls, by creating a promenade. So you really work hard on this. And in 1920, the fortifications of Quebec was recognized as a site of national importance.
Mm-hmm.
In the 1940s, it became a National Historic Site. And among the National Historic Site of the Fortifications of Quebec, there's other areas that were also designed and named national sites or protected sites.
Right.
For example, the Fort and Château Saint-Louis, so under the boardwalk, it was in 2001 that it had its own designation.
It's one. There's so much.
Yeah, I just want to add, if ever you want to read about this, the commemorative objects of all our sites, I strongly invite you to go on the website of Parks Canada. You can find all this information. It's public. So if you wanna, you can really spend hours going through the website of Parks Canada.
That's great. Well, let me get to some questions. Roger Smith, who gave us our talk about St. Augustine in Florida, asked about the redoubt that held 400 men. He wasn't sure, he can remember the name, but how many cannon was on that redoubt? Do we know?
The Redoubt Dauphin originally, I don't remember the plans of the cannons because it was not complete. The fortification wall that was supposed to be built in front of the structure. The wall, the redoubt is built on 4 stories high. It could hold 100 soldiers. The other building next to it, the new barracks, could hold 300 soldiers. And in the new barracks, there was cannons because the new barracks, when it was built, it was the original fortification wall when it was built. And if I remember well, there was 17 embrasures of cannons on the top.
Wow.
Aiming directly at the St. Charles River. So the Redoubt Dauphin never served as an advanced fort, never had cannons. And for the number of it, I think it was something like 4 to 6, but it's never the right numbers that they plan because they don't have the money for the right cannons. Yes.
Yeah. So, one of the things that is so different in a way, although, there's so much that connects all of our sites, with these fortifications and the engineering and everything, and it comes down to, like you said, the location of the fortifications and strategic placement, and also materials. And Don Grobel is asking what kind of stone was used and where did it come from? And was it the same source of the stone as used for Montreal?
Yeah, the first quarries were next to what we have today, the big hotel, the Château Frontenac. So under the Citadel, the street that is there is called La Rue des Carrières, so the Quarry Street. But that stone is schist stone, kind of dark stone that really breaks. So it's not good for fortifications. But close to the city, in Château Richer, in Sillery, and on the South Shore, we have du grès vert de Sillery. So it's a gray limestone, if I remember well, gray stone.
Granite?
Give me a second, I'll just check to have the right translation.
I'm amazed, Americans are notorious for not knowing other languages, and I'm amazed that you not only have such wonderful English skills, but also that you know all these technical terms and can translate them into English. So thank you so much.
Well, it's my pleasure. If hablas español, I'm not good with Spanish. So, grès vert de Sillery, English.
I was thinking the stone must have come from pretty close because it's
so from much. Close, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't have the exact term in English for the yeah, it's a really solid stone. The quarries are really close by.
It's sort of a
And
gray
they
black, and it's very, I remember it just getting sheeted over with ice. So
yeah.
it's one of those things where no matter where you're building fortifications, I guess this is definitely a Vauban technique, use what's available to you on the
Yes.
landscape. So
Yes.
you always want to use what's nearby and the topography that's best. And so
Yeah.
very interesting.
And the fortification, the West Rampart, the city is built in plateaus.
Mm-hmm.
So the bastions, the big point part, are really covers those plateaus. So they really calculated the topography. And for the center of Montreal, the stones, on the south shore, we have discovered that from in front of Quebec City all the way to northern Maine, it is the same type of stones that you can find. So if ever we don't have stones by, because we use stones by, right? Because it's important, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, we use the same stone. But we know that we are able to go as far as northern Maine because it is the same root, I guess. It's then the same kind of bloodline of stone, right? So yeah,
right.
So Montreal had the same type of stones too.
Well, just some words of praise from Angeline Bridges. She said she's just in awe of the preservation that Quebec has accomplished, and the city has jumped to the top of her list of places to visit.
Oh, great, great. Well, yeah, our team are doing a fantastic job by preserving the fortification. I talk about our team at Parks Canada, but if you walk in the old Quebec, you will see people with walking bricks and really hitting stones like it's a really artisan work. It's yeah, they're great.
And there's so much preservation, even the preservation of what you're talking about, that scale model from the 1860s or
from the beginning of the 1800s. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's the coolest thing.
I will write the name in the chat if everyone wants to check it out.
It's incredible. It's absolutely, and it takes up an entire room, but you can take photographs of this model and it just looks, it's perfect. And it's a great now historical document for you, right?
It is. It is. We have searchers sometimes that are doing work in the old Quebec. Every time we dig in the old Quebec, there's an archaeologist that is looking. Recently, there's a new set of condos that are building. They stopped the excavation for the parking lot because it was a former French soldier cemetery. It was after that a hospital. So there's things to be dug up. So,
right,
yeah.
right.
Imagine living in Greece.
Right, just a little bit colder. So speaking of that, and I'm going to get to everybody's thing too, but I was remembering a few years ago, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce this, but there were some wooden palisades that were excavated, correct?
Yes.
On Saint-Ursule or
Saint-Ursule, yes, Saint-Ursule.
Right.
Ursule.
And
yes.
the 1693 Palisades was
yes
fascinating.
So in 1693, the second wall. Remember the picture we saw with the wooden kind of beams that went out and the big trench in front. The thing is, I don't want to talk much about this discovery because between archaeologists, they're actually not, let's say, on the same level of interpretation. So it can be the fortification walls, or it can be something else.
Well,
we're not sure.
It takes a lot. I know, as a background in archaeology, it takes a lot of convincing before the archaeologists will.
But it does look like the footprint of a fortification wall.
And
it
fantastic
does look like
preservation in the mud there too.
Yeah,
which was great.
Daniel Gosselin, the parks manager in Quebec City, wrote for the stone. It's sandstone. Sandstone.
Oh, sandstone. Interesting. Well, I know that there's, that's interesting. Okay. Some folks said that they were surprised to know that Quebec was so concerned that it could be endangered during the American Civil War, so much so that more fortifications were built. And I think a lot of times we think the American Civil War is something that really just happens in the South, Southern United States, but it did have very big impact on a wide scale. So let's see. Payson says that was so interesting, and she's really influenced to try and visit soon. The preservation of fortifications is amazing. Mitchell says the same, for the preservation efforts are so enviable. Renat says, thank you. Merci beaucoup from Janie.
Merci.
All right, sandstone from Daniel. Okay. And Roger says, thank you so much. Definitely fascinating and makes us want to visit. Interesting. Oh, great. Nick from last time says, we were also jealous in Charleston where we have no stone and so little fabric above ground anyway from our early fortifications. So
yeah, we can claim for our city that it's the only fortified city in North America.
It's really,
so it's a title
really
that
unique. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really unique.
Isn't it interesting how they all weave together? You know, St. Augustine and Quebec both have citadels, you know, whereas Charleston does not. You have three Martello towers. Next time we hear from Bermuda, there's a Martello tower there.
It's a former British colony as well. It was all around the British Empire, Martello towers. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the French engineering is something that weaves throughout, not only with Quebec, but also, as we heard last time from Nick, the laying out and the design and the layout of fortifications in Charlestown was through French residents, Huguenots of Charleston. So there's so many things that are similar and different about the designs and what's left and what we all had in the colonial period, for sure. And I think what we'll hear next time too is, just like Quebec has all these different periods that are expressed on the landscape, Charleston, and one of the things that Nick is researching is Charleston had this early walled city, but it also had different fortifications in different periods over time. And Bermuda, that we'll see next time, has a lot of, 400 years of fortifications on the landscape too. So these are not static expressions for one time period. They all evolve, as you say. What was I going to say? Let's see. So I'm going to see if there's any more questions.
Oh, Dr. Butler added that Charleston got 2 towers.
I didn't know that. They were both removed in the 1820s. That would be, Nick, if you haven't done I'm going to unmute Nick. If Nick hasn't done a blog post on the Martello towers, I think that would be fantastic to do.
I will.
Oh, great.
I mentioned, I did a podcast 2 weeks ago about public cemeteries in the 19th century. And the largest public cemetery on the peninsula of Charleston that was active from 1841 to 1927. When it was started in 1841, it was called Tower Hill Cemetery.
Oh, interesting.
Because that's where the Martello Tower used to be, on at the west end of Fishburne Street, where they built a swimming pool in the 1970s and dug up bodies.
So obliterated all archaeological evidence.
Yeah.
Great. Interesting. Well, does anybody else have any questions, I guess, before we go? I think everybody's really just jealous now, Eric, of everything that you
Yeah,
have.
well, it's not my fault. You can blame my colleagues, blame Lord Dufferin. Yeah, it's we are truly let's say that we know that we work in a special place. We know that we live in a very beautiful city as well, and that you saw the gates. The image of Quebec is linked with the fortifications. So yeah, it's I know that people are a bit jealous.
I think it's wonderful too that someone who did the marking of the turrets of the
this was it was done by the city of Quebec, the Place Royale, where you saw the marking. Place Royale in the 1980s had a major restoration that was done. It's really nice. But the thing is, just, if ever you visit Quebec, I just want to say something. All the houses were whitewashed. Now we see the stones of the houses. It's really nice, but because of our weather, with the freeze, it destroyed the fortification walls. Yeah, for us in Quebec City, our team, what we're doing for the restoration, it's always a matter of where can we get the water out of the fortifications, away from the stones. So the work we've done recently, the last time was around 50 years ago it was done. So it's something that when people were visiting, they saw those stones all on the ground, walls being torn down, people working. This is why are you doing this? And we're like, whoa, we're doing this so that we could be sure that our fortification wall, because of the weather and you see all the stones that are on the ground, they are all marked, and they will be replaced exactly at the same place.
Right.
If we need to replace one of the stone because it's destroyed, we take stones from the same quarries, shape it the same size, put it back.
That's amazing.
So when you look at the fortification walls of Quebec, it is how it was built since the last restoration.
It's really, really wonderful. Well, we're all coming to visit, so get ready. Thank you so much, Eric. This has been so much fun.
It was my pleasure.
And I guess we will see everyone next week in Bermuda.
Who's paying the plane ticket again?
I know, right? Well, we'll pretend that we're there. We'll turn the heat up and put your shorts on and we'll go to Bermuda. So, all right. Well, thank you so much again. And we'll see everybody next week.
Merci tout le monde. Thanks a lot for being here this evening, listening to my presentation.
Merci. All right.
Merci.
Bye, everyone.